So my name is Jonathan Greenblatt. I'm a member of the faculty at the Anderson School of Management at UCLA, and I'm one of the two co-founders of Ethos Water. Ethos Water started out as an idea developed by my classmate from business school, Peter Thum. We connected in late 2001, early 2002, and started to collaborate on market research and agreed together to create the business and operationalize this plan in September or so of 2002. He moved out to Los Angeles in early 2003, and we literally founded the company and started to produce a super premium water, Ethos Water, that would use part of its profits to fund humanitarian water programs to bring clean water and sanitation access to children in their communities in the developing world. It was a pretty simple idea. It was, how could we connect the billions of people around the world who lack clean water with 150 million consumers of bottled water here in the United States? I mean, bottled water is one of the fastest growing beverages on the market, and yet while it grows at a remarkable pace and delivers enormous profits for large multinational corporations, there are billions of people around the world who lack clean drinking water. Roughly 1.2 billion people don't have any clean drinking water, and about 2.5 billion don't have sanitation. And the water-related diseases that manifest from this problem is the leading cause of death among children around the world. They say a child dies, every 11 seconds or so due to a water-related disease. So it's a huge problem while it's a huge consumer market. And the idea for Ethos was a simple one. Could you connect consumers and a cause through a consumer product? So I drink this water and someone gets clean water, water for water. And that linkage between consumption and cause made Ethos a very different premise than other socially responsible brands. So I think that Ethos and we as the two founders stand on the shoulders of people like Ben Cohen and Wayne Silby and Gary Hirshberg and Anita Roddick and the pioneers of the space. But at the same time, what we did that was a little bit different was connect, again, the core product to the cause we're trying to affect. I drink water and someone gets clean water. So we started the business, as I mentioned, in 2003, meaning that's when we founded the company and started selling product in Southern California. And several years later, as the business was starting to grow, and we were scaling it through Whole Foods Market, through Cost Plus World Market, through other natural distributors and retail, premium retail outlets, we engaged in a conversation with folks at Starbucks Coffee Company. We thought Starbucks would be a wonderful place to sell our super premium beverage. And I should say, we had this mission of helping children get clean water and trying to raise awareness about the world water crisis. So we achieved the former by aspiring to donate 50% of our after-tax profits to fund water programs around the world. That was a huge commitment, 50%. And I can tell you that it made it very difficult to bring in investment capital. We had some friends and family who invested a little bit and eventually raised money from Pierre Omidyar and the Omidyar Network. Their financial support allowed us to really capitalize the company and scale it. The other part of the mission was to educate people and to make an issue that wasn't very well understood resonate with people here in the U.S. Most of them didn't even realize there was a world water crisis, let alone why it mattered to them. So when we went to Starbucks, we thought this would be a marvelous distribution channel. So Starbucks is a very socially responsible company, and they have a long history of supporting the origins communities from where they source their coffee and tea. They volunteer hundreds of thousands of hours in communities here in the U.S. where they operate their stores. Heck, water is a pretty fundamental issue as well. So coffee is just flavored water. 98% of a cup of coffee is just water. And maybe more than anything else, for a super premium brand like this, we weren't succeeding just because of the cause. Sure, we were making donations and investments in water programs in Asia, in Africa, and Latin America. But why we were succeeding was because this product was as good as a bottle of Evian or a bottle of Fiji. Price, package, placement, all the marketing basics worked and worked really well. That's why Ethos succeeded. So cause is a bit of a tiebreaker. In order to succeed, you've got to deliver on all the basics of the category. And so in that sense, Starbucks was a wonderful distribution platform because they offered a super premium retail outlet. strategically located in all the right neighborhoods, with a consumer base who's fairly price insensitive. And we would be the only water in those stores, or so we hoped. So we went to Starbucks early on and said, we've got an idea. We've got an early new product. We'd love to share it with you. Those conversations took, I don't know, probably about 18 months to really get moving, to the point where they said, we think you're ready, and we'd love to work with you. But when they looked under the hood, they felt you guys just aren't large enough to support our 5,000 stores. So we had been talking to Starbucks for over a year, and Piero Midyar, our investor, had a relationship with Howard Schultz, the chairman and CEO of Starbucks. He placed a call, and Starbucks, or Howard, took a meeting with my business partner and I. So we flew up to Seattle, and we had prepared for like a month. We had a long PowerPoint presentation. We had rehearsed our parts. And Peter and I had been working together really well, so we knew each other's cadence, and were really ready to deliver the presentation of our lives. So we were in the conference room, all ready to go, and Howard walked in a few minutes late. He walked in and said, "Hello, I'm Howard," and we certainly knew who he was. And I remember very well, because we had everything set up, the projector, the computer, the sort of handouts. And Howard said, "What is all this?" And we said, "Well, this is our presentation." He said, "I don't want any of that. Let's just go sit in my office." And we had this moment of sheer terror. We said, he said, "Let's just go sit down and talk." So I said, wow, all that work out the window. But on the other hand, we better convert. So we walked 10 feet over to his office and sat down at his sofa and his chairs over his coffee table. And he held the bottle in his hands, and this is the new bottle, not our old sort of classic version. He held the old bottle in his hands. He said, "What is this?" And we literally had like the elevator pitch. We had 2 minutes to get to mind meld with him. And we said, "It's Ethos water. It's a super premium bottle water that helps children get water. We donate half our profits to bring water to communities in need. We're sold in premium retail outlets, and we're helping communities in Ethiopia, Kenya, Honduras, Indonesia, or Bangladesh, etc." And Howard looked at it, he held it in his hand, and he said, "I like it. How do we get this done?" And as an entrepreneur, I mean, it was this huge moment of catharsis and relief and joy and exhilaration, because in that moment we had what we had been waiting for years, which was that green light, no pun intended, because it was coming from Starbucks. Now, getting from Howard saying, "Let's get this done," to launching it in the stores, that took almost 18 months, maybe a little less, but 16 months, a long time. But that moment of validation from one of the most strategic thinkers in the corporate world, particularly on brand and social responsibility, that was a huge moment for Ethos. Because we were a fairly regional brand. Again, we were growing through Whole Foods, and we were growing nicely through Cost Plus, so we had national presence. But in reality, our sales were concentrated on the West Coast, really even in California. So Starbucks said, "We love what you do. We love the brand. We love the cause. We like the two of you. So we don't just want to sell your product in our stores. We would actually like to scale your brand. And we think we can best do that by taking an ownership position and using Starbucks and all of our resources as a platform to enable your ambition." Well, when one of the most beloved brands in the world and a very successful Fortune 500 company comes calling with that kind of offer, it's pretty exciting. And it was really exciting for us. If you look at the beverage category, very often the outcomes are sales. You see M&A again and again and again. Odwalla, Naked Juice, the list goes on and on. But for us, we did not expect an acquisition at this early stage in the game, which was interesting because it meant we had some leverage. So if you think about our mission, again, it was about helping children get water, which we enabled through our donation of our profits. And it was about educating people about the issues, which we enabled through our marketing and our promotional work. Well, in terms of the former, we thought if we're going to do this deal, we've got to make sure we execute on the social dimension of the business, not just the financial dimension. Because they offered us a price that was compelling, and the economics felt good for two entrepreneurs. I mean, I had invested my whole savings in the business. So it felt like a good outcome, but we knew the brand would not succeed if we didn't not only scale its retail presence, but scale its social impact. So we sort of took that mission that I described and broke it into a couple pieces. So first we said, for us today, every bottle makes a difference. Every time you buy Ethos, you're helping someone in need. So how can you help us to do that? Well, by our math, our back of the envelope math, when our business reached profitability, we estimated we'd be doing maybe between 2.25 and 2.5 cents per unit. That would be the profit. Now I should point out, we weren't profitable when we sold the company. We were still making donations. You could think about it like a marketing expense, but we weren't yet profitable. So we were trying to aspire to an ambition of being socially responsible. Every bottle makes a difference, but our model hadn't fully kicked in yet. So the Starbucks opportunity seemed very compelling. And so we thought if with our small scale and high cost structure, we could do roughly, let's say, upwards of 2.5 cents per unit, we should ask them to double it. So we sat down and said, well, if you want to buy the business, every bottle needs to make a difference, and you need to do at least 5 cents per unit. And they agreed. So that was both like a moment of exhilaration and a moment of like, oh my gosh, we should have asked for 10 cents a unit or a quarter. But 5 cents a unit, I think, felt fair and reasonable to them relative to the economics they needed to see, right? The cash return that they needed to make it viable. And it felt good for us because it was more than double what we could do on our own. So right there, we looked at other M&A in the category, in the field, I mean, of socially responsible business. And we took inspiration from Ben Cohen and Tom Chappell of Toms of Maine and Gary of Stonyfield and thought, how do we learn from their examples? So one manifestation of that was by getting a per unit contribution. So 5 cents a unit mean profits can come and go, right? We've seen the accounting shenanigans of Enron. But this way we knew no matter what, there would always be at least a nickel a bottle forever. And I think what's fundamental here and worth pointing out is not only would every bottle make a difference, but the brand architecture wouldn't allow Starbucks or anyone else to really disentangle water as a cause from our bottled water product. So whereas some other businesses, again, you've seen maybe the cause change after a sale, for us, the cause was embedded in the DNA of the brand itself. So every bottle would always make a difference, driving water to people who need it anytime someone consumed our water. So that was number one. Now at the same time, 5 cents a unit, we knew it would feel small relative to the price point of a bottle of Ethos in Starbucks. I mean, think about it. If you're going to walk in and pay $1.80 or $2 a bottle, 5 cents feels small. So we knew we wanted every bottle to make a difference. We also knew we wanted a big impact. So we laid out a case for what we expected the sales would be over the first 5 years. And we said to the management team, you need to agree right up front to accrue at least $10 million. $10 million as the amount that would go to the cause by 2010. And so they also, fortunately, agreed to do that. So now we have a nickel a bottle, a per unit contribution that will never change, that's sacrosanct, and we had a big commitment that would happen right away. So on an individual basis in the disaggregate and a cumulative basis in the aggregate, we had a huge impact and we had an individual ability to create change. So that felt like a really good way. And to put it in context, I think we had about $100,000 committed to water programs, sustainable water programs around the world when we were purchased. By getting our impact to $10 million, it was 100x what we could do on our own. So again, when Starbucks came to us and said we'd like to buy the business, the first question for us was, can we scale the social impact? And the answer, from a monetary point of view, was yes. But I think what was even more exciting was the educational point of view. When I mentioned before about part of our mission was to create awareness around the world water crisis. So here what was exciting was the opportunity to convert 5,000 Starbucks stores into 5,000 classrooms. to turn 40 million consumers a week into 40 million students. And to use Ethos as a case study in how you can create a brand that people can read and just consume the water if they want to. Or they can read the label on the back, look at the marketing materials, go to the website, and get increasingly educated. And so that's when you really create change. Because change isn't about, $10 million to the cause or $100 million. I mean, to put this again in some context, let's say there are 3 billion people in total affected by the world water crisis. Roughly, probably about right. And the average cost to provide someone with a lifetime of clean water is about $25. That's a very low number. It's based on a study by a group called WaterAid. $25 at 3 billion people is $75 billion. So if Ethos did 10 million or 100 million or $1 billion, still that's if you'll excuse the phrase, a drop in the bucket. But when you can really create change is when you can mobilize 40 million Starbucks consumers, heck, just 150,000 employees out there on the front lines in communities across the United States. And so for us, as compelling as the money was, 5 cents a unit, $10 million, what was even more compelling was the opportunity to continue to use the marketing and promotion to engage and excite and inspire a generation of young people. So Peter and I were really excited about the opportunity to convert those stores into classrooms, those consumers into students, those employees into teachers, and to create a platform for advocacy and engagement. Because that's really how you create change. It's not about the money that you can move. It's about the people that you can mobilize. And if you look at the history of social movements in this country, from the anti-apartheid movement to the civil rights movement to the women's temperance movement, it's always about grassroots organizing. And I even think we can look back to the recent presidential campaign of Barack Obama, and again, you see it. Now, he used Meetup, and he used social networking and Facebook, but it's the same result. It's leveraging people on a massive scale to drive political change and to create the willpower to move markets. So that was really exciting for us. And ultimately, I think the most enduring examples of why I think the deal has succeeded has been meeting young people who've started companies similar to Ethos that were inspired because they discovered us in a Starbucks store. Or meeting activists who got engaged in the world water crisis because in part they heard about it through the groundswell that Ethos was able to help ignite. I mean, I don't think we can take the credit, but I think when that book is written, we will be at least a footnote, if not a paragraph, in a chapter about how ordinary people started to get engaged on the water issue. I should say that to make the deal work was itself a lot of work. So a first thing that we learned was we couldn't simply go to them and say, you should carry our water. It was a sustained exercise in sort of politics and management. So we were fortunate that a former colleague of mine from the White House was inside the company, a brand manager that Peter knew was inside the company, and these people helped us to understand how to navigate Starbucks. When it came time to negotiate the deal, we were very fortunate that one of our board members, who essentially was the CFO of the Omidyar network, helped us with that negotiation. Because as a small business, when approached by a global multinational corporation, you don't have a lot of leverage. So we relied heavily on our board to support us, both directly in the negotiations and indirectly. So as an example, one of our advisory board members was a guy by the name of Seth Goldman, who years later would sell a large stake of his company to Coca-Cola, but at that time, Seth had already brought Gary Hirshberg onto his board. And so we took great inspiration from what Gary had done and Seth channeled him a bit, I think, in giving us advice. Like, for example, to get an ironclad commitment in the purchase agreement, which we did, that stated specifically, we will donate at least a nickel for every bottle of Ethos sold. So getting that language in the deal, in the contract, was fundamental to our success. Getting language in the deal that talked about the marketing and promotion will be about the world water crisis was really huge. So I think part of why the business succeeded, and the deal worked was number one, leveraging our board. Number two, accessing our broader advisory board. Number three, creating a basis of support within Starbucks that we cultivated over time. Number four, we had language in the deal that enshrined the commitment. We didn't leave it to the fuzziness of, well, we'll work it out later. We made sure it was part of the relationship. And again, we just took lessons from what other socially responsible businesses had undergone as their brands changed when they were unable to get similar language in place. I think another reason why it worked is both Peter and I then joined the company, serving as executives at Starbucks, and joining the board of the foundation, where again, we were able to drive the deal, and if not, let's say this is after the negotiation, but this is the actual execution. You know, here's where the rubber meets the road, because the contract and the language isn't really worth the paper itself unless you can ensure the kind of cultural acceptance and mobilization of resources, which we were able to do. I mean, we basically, Peter moved up to Seattle, I commuted between Los Angeles and Seattle, and being on the ground in the Starbucks Support Center, the corporate headquarters, working with senior management, being able to go out to the field and meet Starbucks partners, which is what they call their employees, meeting partners at retail stores all over the United States. So when we launched the brand in the retail stores, we didn't just do a press release. In fact, we undertook a marketing campaign, and we converted a used RV, like a 42-foot recreational vehicle, to a biodiesel fuel system. And we outfitted the interior with flat panel screens, and we painted the exterior with quotes about and facts about the world water crisis. And we drove this biodiesel bus across the United States over 11 weeks and visited Starbucks stores all over the country. And we did that connecting with consumers in many cities. We would do walks for water, walks that symbolize the journey that women and children take in Africa on a daily basis to get water. We did walks for water in 10 cities, I think. And now every year, Starbucks has walks for water on World Water Day, which is great. But I think more importantly here, by visiting, 200 some odd stores, I mean, crazy number, we were able to connect with Starbucks partners and store managers and regional managers and help them understand the value of the brand and its founding ethos and those precepts that make it special. And that's one of the reasons why I think Ethos has succeeded, because that investment, the seeds that we planted, are now bearing fruit. And you have Starbucks stores and managers and individual partners who are just committed to the brand all over the country. And that's worked. I think as I look back, I think for both, I don't want to speak for Peter, but I think both of us benefited enormously from having a marvelous a partner like Starbucks. I can't say enough. I think it is so important that the parent company that acquired the business was so deeply committed to the mission. And I give Starbucks enormous credit. I mean, again, I think they had a history of social responsibility. Howard Schultz, the chairman and CEO and really the founder, is a remarkable person, a true entrepreneur who's talked about creating a benevolent corporation for many years. But everyone at the company was so values-driven. It's a lot of the reason why Ethos has succeeded. Because again, I think that their true north is a constructive, positive one. And so Ethos fits well in that, against that sort of canvas. You can't contrive mission, right? It has to be sincere and genuine. And because it is at Starbucks, Ethos has had a great home. I also think about what we might have done differently. And I will say that I look with great affection and respect at people like Gary Hirshberg for what he was able to do to not just sell Stonyfield Farms into Danone, but to retain its independence, to maintain some measure of distance from the parent corporation. And he set up milestones and governance structures to facilitate that. And I think Gary has also, because of his success, become a bit of a chief sustainability officer within Danone and helped change the company from within. I think Ethos helped to change thinking at Starbucks around the water issue, but boy, it would have been great if the deal had allowed us a little bit more independence. Now, we could question, would we have succeeded? I don't think our brand was as mature as Stonyfield was when Danone acquired it. Because we were so nascent and young, actually being embedded in the headquarters, being in front of people every day, I think helped our success. But it might have been neat, with a little bit more independence, for us to think about how we could extend Ethos. I should say that after the sale, one of the things that happened was Starbucks and Pepsi, who have a joint venture, brought Ethos into that joint venture. So now the brand is manufactured and distributed and sold really via the Pepsi system. Again, I think that will actually help the business to scale up dramatically outside of Starbucks retail stores. Starbucks is the kind of partner that gave us that kind of access, which means I think it was a really good marriage. But if we'd been a little more independent, who knows what the future might have held. All in all, if I were a social entrepreneur and I were building a mission-driven business, I think M&A is a very likely exit scenario. And I think there are now a lot of lessons from the Ethoses and the Stonyfields and the Honest Teas as 3 recent examples, and lots of others exist from which you can draw lessons. I wish we had had a real playbook when we sold Ethos in 2005. I think we would have benefited. So I think in large respect, this work, to create almost an oral history amongst the entrepreneurs who had successful exits, is an invaluable contribution to the sector. So thank you for what you're doing.